up to under 12s with Glenmore Football Club. I'm one of 14, and the reason why I got into it was my dad and my brothers. I used to watch all their games from the age of 3. It was community football, so it was the best type of football.
So proud.
Local footy is really important, I think, especially Glenmore being the suburb and this being the main supplier of sports for the community. You look at what Glenmore are trying to do here, trying to bring up a women's team, and in the background is my niece who just finished under 12. So at the moment she hasn't got a pathway. So Melanie's played for Glenmore from the same age as me, from the age of 7, and she is now too old to play boys football. So she's excited about the girls team, aren't you?
Very.
So she's extremely competitive, not as good as me.
Calm down.
Probably a few kids are not on the right road, and I think if you give them that sport or that outlet to go and meet new people, it can benefit the community in more ways than one. What do I say to girls? It doesn't matter who you are, what your skill level you are, what fitness level you are. It's a good environment to be in, it's fun, you meet new mates. This is where you want to be, so come down and have a kick.
So I'm Claire Johnston, and I'm an accredited cricket bat maker and the first female in the world. I learnt how to make cricket bats from Ian Cullen. There's a lot of bats out there for men, and I felt that there was an opportunity there to actually work with women to make better bats and to actually make them for their style. So recently I was commissioned to make 5 cricket bats for the Pascoe Vale Headfield Cricket Club for their under-13s girls cricket team. And to see their faces when they were given the cricket bats was just brilliant. So what I'd really love to be able to do is to keep working with my local community, the local cricket clubs, particularly the women, and work to make great cricket bats.
My name is Michael Tortoni. I'm the founder of Melbourne's legendary jazz club, Bennett's Lane. I've recently moved to the very, very cool Brunswick. The Jazz Lab here on Leslie Street, Brunswick is Melbourne's new home of jazz. In my old club, you might have seen Prince for a late night set, or the Wynton Marsalis Band, or even the Harry Connick Jr. Trio. My new club will also host stars of contemporary music, starting with the Bill Frisell Trio for the Melbourne International Jazz Festival, as well as local stars. So drop in for some great music and a drink at the Jazz Lab.
So my name is Zainab Abouid. I'm 19 years old and I currently study the Bachelor's of Law and International Relations at La Trobe University. I partake in my local community by volunteering with local MPs such as Peter Khalil. I like to also attend and organise events that surround family violence to help ensure that women are heard and young women have voices. I wanted to represent myself as a Muslim woman and represent my community, so I thought why not start at a young age, so when I grow up perhaps I can be in Parliament one day. I feel like I should take advantage of these opportunities and make sure that I advocate on behalf of women, especially in my community that are subjected to family violence.
My name's Leslie. I have been with Moreland Family Daycare as an educator for over 36 years, I think. Family Daycare is a wonderful organisation. We look after children in our own home, they blend in with the family, and it's fantastic.
I love Family Daycare.
I can choose my own hours, very flexible. I've made wonderful friendships with lots of the families. I'm now looking after children of the children I used to care for. The children.
Good evening, councillors, members of the gallery, and to our viewers at home live streaming tonight's meeting. My name's Narina Di Lorenzo. I'm Moreland Council's Chief Executive Officer. As the Mayor is overseas on approved council business, I'd like to ask councillors for a motion to elect a chair for tonight's meeting.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Ratner.
Councillor Afanli, and as a seconder, Councillor Aboud. All those in favour? Carried. I declare that carried. I'd now like to ask Councillor Ratnam to assume the chair.
Good evening, everyone, members of the gallery and all those watching at home. Our meeting is being held on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people, and I wish to acknowledge them as the traditional owners. I'd also like to pay my respects to the elders past and present, and the elders from other communities who may be with us here today. I acknowledge that currently many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have made Moreland home. In doing so, have contributed to the positive, rich diversity of this municipality. Members of the gallery, please note this council meeting is being recorded and web streamed live to council's website and Facebook. This recording will also be available as video on demand. Gallery attendees are advised that they will be recorded during this meeting. Councillors, just as a reminder that in line with the adopted councillor conduct principles as outlined in the Councillor Code of Conduct, councillors should ensure that they conduct themselves in the meeting with integrity, impartially exercise their responsibilities in the interests of the local community, and not improperly seek to confer or advantage any person. This behaviour will support principles for leadership and good governance that secures public confidence in the office of councillor. I'd like now to introduce the councillors and officers in attendance tonight. I'd like to introduce Councillor Natalie Aboud, Councillor Sue Bolton, Councillor Anna-Olivia Carley-Hannon, Councillor Alia Farnley,
Hi.
Myself, Councillor Mark Riley, Councillor Lambros Tapanos, and Councillor Oscar Yildiz. The officers in attendance with us tonight are our Chief Executive Officer, Nerina Di Lorenzo, Director of City Infrastructure, Grant Thorne, Manager of Property and Governance, Olivia Wright, and Unit Manager of Governance, Sally Curran. Note we have a number of apologies, councillors, including from Mayor Davidson, who is representing council at a conference from today onwards, Councillors John Kavanagh and Dale Martin. And we'll note those apologies. We don't need a motion for that. I'd like now to move on to the disclosure of interest and conflicts of interest. Are there any conflicts or disclosure of interest that councillors wish to declare? Neil? Okay, so we might move on now to the substantive part of the meeting tonight, and first we'll need to deal with some procedure to be able to hear the submissions. Councillors, in accordance with our meeting procedure law, we need to suspend standing orders to allow us to hear from submitters. Could I please have a motion to suspend standing orders to do this? Councillor Farnley, and seconded by Councillor Aboud. No further discussion, I presume, on that? So I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. So we've now got standing orders suspended so that we can hear submissions, and I'd like to outline the process. Before I invite people to speak to their submission to the proposed general local law, I'd like to take note of some important things, please. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to hear from people in support of a written submission that you've made. Councillors have received a copy of all submissions, so this will be an opportunity to speak in support of your submission. As we have a number of people to hear from tonight, each speaker will be asked to keep their comments to 3 minutes. We have quite a tight timeline, given that we've got a meeting immediately following this, the Urban Planning Committee, which starts at 8 p.m. So unfortunately, we won't be able to stretch over time tonight, so I will be quite tight with the timelines, and with a 3-minute speaking limit for each person at 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, I will ask you to start winding up, but you've got till the 3 minutes to end. I'd like to remind submitters and councillors, if we need to, we may ask questions to clarify what you're saying. Tonight's not an opportunity to debate the issues or get into a discussion, so councillors won't be providing a response or a statement in response to what you're saying. There will be ample opportunity to do that when we are following this meeting, and also at the subsequent council meeting where we will decide on the new general local law, which will come back to us in a couple of months. Following tonight's meeting, we will consider what we have heard along with the written submissions before we consider adopting the general local law at a future council meeting. We are going to go section by section, first hearing from submitters who've made submissions on a number of items, and then we're going to go section by section based on the category of the submission that you made, for example, permit system, public places, camping, etc. And so we have broken that down into different sections. I note that we're starting off with submitters who've made submissions on a number of items. Now, given that there's a 3-minute time limit for each person and you actually have a number of items that you've made a submission on, we would ask, please, that we will limit it to 3 minutes first. I'm going to find out how many of those submitters are here tonight. And at the end of all the submissions, if we have extra time, you will be given the opportunity to speak further. So I hope that'll provide some fairness to a very tight timeline and agenda that we have tonight. And we will try our best to hear everyone out on the topics they want to talk about. So I'm going to first ask in the first section, if you could please raise your hands if you're here, because it'll give me a sense of how much time we have for this section. Mr. Michael Hemel-Green, I can see him in the audience. Is Mr. Darren Saffin here? No? Mr. Eddie Gauchi and Lena Serra? Yep, you're here, great. Peter Thomas? Dawn Waite? John Engelhardt? I think I saw John, yes, great. Dave Holmes on behalf of Socialist Alliance. Mr. David Nuns. Yes, he's here. And Amina and Bernard Flynn. Great. Excellent. So we might have to keep this section to 3 minutes each, but we will try to make up some time and you'll be able to provide further submission following the end of the other category system, and I hope that's okay. Thank you for your understanding on that as well. So we will now move on to the first submitter, which will be Mr. Michael Hemel-Green. If you could please come up to the lectern.
Yes, thank you. I did have concerns about on 15 areas, so within 3 minutes I can obviously only refer to a few of them. I do think that the public consultation process for the local law reviews should be extended to 3 months, and that external stakeholders should be consulted in the drafting as well as the public consultation stage. I think there's been a negative impact on the present draft as a result of not having sufficient time for consultation, particularly with external stakeholders. In relation to camping, I think there are still problems with, even though there's provisions for homeless, I think it's not clear how accosting homeless people would be able to establish their status, and also there may be homeless people who are sleeping in a vehicle, and I think the present law is not sufficient. So I would say delete.
Councillors, we're adjourning the meeting.
I've been with Moreland Family Daycare for 8 months now, and I absolutely love it. The main reason I started with Family Daycare was to be with my little one. Family Daycare is a small environment, so mostly I only have 4 children and it's in a home. Moreland have been really supportive of the whole thing, and they helped me find children when I first started. There's so many benefits of working Family Daycare and becoming an educator. Working in your own home, flexible hours, also just watching the other children grow and being such a part of their life. I recommend to educators that want a good life balance, if they have their own child, Family Daycare is a great avenue to go down.
Hey Moreland, today I'm down in St Kilda for the Midsummer Pride March supporting the LGBTQ community. It's a beautiful day. I'm proud to be here representing Moreland, walking behind so many wonderful dedicated people. This march goes towards exactly what our values are. At Moreland, we're one community proudly diverse.
More pride! More pride! More pride! More pride! More pride! More pride!
I'm Moana Hope, most people call me Mo. I've grown up playing at Glenmore Football Club and now I play for Collingwood Football Club. I grew up in Glenroy, born and bred. My first year ever I played at Hatfield. From the second year all the way up to under 12s, it's Glenroy Football Club. I'm one of 14 and the reason why I got into it was my dad and my brothers. I used to watch all their games from the age of 3. It was community football, so it was the best type of football.
So proud.
Local footy is really important. I think, especially Merri-bek being a suburb and this being the main supplier of sports for the community. You look at what Glenmore are trying to do here, trying to bring up a women's team, and in the background is my niece who just finished under 12. So at the moment she hasn't got a pathway. So Melanie's played for Glenmore from the same age as me, from the age of 7, and she is now too old to play boys football. So she's excited about the girls team, aren't you?
Very.
So she's extremely competitive, not as good as me.
Calm down.
Probably a few kids that are not on the right road, and I think if you give them that sport or that outlet to go and meet new people, it can benefit the community in more ways than one. What do I say to girls? It doesn't matter who you are, what your skill level you are, what fitness level you are. It's a good environment to be in, it's fun, you meet new mates. This is where you want to be, so come down and have a kick.
So I'm Claire Johnston and I'm an accredited cricket bat maker and the first female in the world. I learnt how to make cricket bats from Ian Cullen. There's a lot of bats out there for men, and I felt that there was an opportunity there to actually work with women to make better bats and to actually make them for their style. So recently I was commissioned to make 5 cricket bats for the Pascoe Vale Headfield Cricket Club for their under-13s girls cricket team. And yeah, to see their faces when they were given the cricket bats was just brilliant. So what I'd really love to be able to do is to keep working with my local community, the local cricket clubs, particularly the women, and yeah, work to make great cricket bats.
My name is Michael Tortoni. I'm the founder of Melbourne's legendary jazz club, Bennett's Lane. I've recently moved to the very, very cool Brunswick. The Jazz Lab here on Leslie Street, Brunswick is Melbourne's new home of jazz. In my old club, you might have seen Prince for a late night set, or the Wynton Marsalis Band, or even the Harry Connick Jr. Trio. My new club will also host stars of contemporary music, starting with the Bill Frisell Trio for the Melbourne International Jazz Festival, as well as local stars. So drop in for some great music and a drink at the Jazz Lab.
So my name is Zainab Abouid. I'm 19 years old and I currently study the Bachelors of Law and International Relations at La Trobe University. I partake in my local community by volunteering with local MPs such as Peter Khalil. I like to also attend and organise events that surround family violence to help ensure that women are heard and young women have voices. I wanted to represent myself as a Muslim woman and represent my community, so I thought why not start at a young age, so when I grow up perhaps I can be in Parliament one day. I feel like I should take advantage of these opportunities and make sure that I advocate on behalf of women, especially in my community that are subjected to family violence.
My name's Leslie. I have been with Moreland Family Daycare as an educator for over 36 years, I think. Family Daycare is a wonderful organisation. We look after children in our own home, they blend in with the family, and it's fantastic.
I love Family Daycare.
I can choose my own hours, very flexible. I've made wonderful friendships with lots of the families. I'm now looking after children of the children I used to care for. The children just growing and developing is a wonderful, wonderful experience for me every day. I'd recommend Family Daycare to anybody and everybody. Oh, where's my Scouty snuggle?
Back everyone, to the viewers at home, we apologise for that interruption. We're now resuming our meeting to hear from our first submitter, and I'll please ask Mr Michael Himmelgreen to take the podium again.
Up to camping.
Yes, to resume what I'm saying, I do think that there should be a greater public consultation as part of the general law reviews, including consultation with stakeholders as part of the drafting as well as the public consultation stage. So a couple of points I'd like to make in relation, I started making in relation to camping, that there may be homeless people who are using cars, so just simply trying to get rid of cars or vans doesn't address the needs of homeless people, and the provisions that allow for sort of recognition of homeless people involve accosting them, and that might well be experienced as harassment. In relation to furniture in public places, I think this is a very unfortunate restriction. It's potentially anti-democratic. We often need, in order to collect petition signatures, to provide materials and publications for people to browse, often need to put up card tables. The long-term implications of having a ban on that are very worrying from a democratic point of view. There are provisions for permits, and I understand it should be easy to get them, but in fact there may be bureaucratic obstacles to doing that. Council agendas are only put up on the web on a Friday evening. It may be necessary to muster support on a council agenda item coming up on the following Wednesday. You need to be able to contact people over the weekend, approach people in terms of card tables in public places. So to me, the permit system is not going to solve even if they're easily obtainable, it's not going to solve the problem of needing to have furniture in public places at short notice. And of course, we're looking at a public law that's going to be in place for the next 10 years. We have no idea what the composition of this council may be over the years. We have all of you very committed to free speech and supporting community groups at the moment. But what happens if there's a sudden shift of representation to the likes of the people who just broke up our meeting just now? So I think that it's important. I would simply delete 7.5. In relation to...
just hit 2.5 minutes, Michael.
How much?
You've just hit 2.5 minutes, so you've only got 30 seconds to go.
30 seconds, yes.
But we will try and find some more time for you later.
Yeah, in relation to street art, I think clause 6.2 related to street art is addressing something that is not actually a problem, but a desirable community enlivening of often dull and drab public places. The knitted woolens on many lampposts and other structures in the municipality have lifted all our spirits. They compare very favourably with the council's extraordinary decision to incongruously replace proper street pavement with uneven black bitumen at the Coburg Shopping Centre.
If I could please ask you to start winding up, Michael. We will try and find a bit more time at the end.
Yeah, so I think with the present public law draft, even though it's a great improvement on the previous draft law, particularly in relation to allowing the handing out of leaflets without permits, I think that's absolutely crucial. That goes to the heart of freedom of speech and democratic spirit, within Australia. So I would conclude that I think that the major improvements still need to be made, and that we should go nowhere near any attempt to restrict the handing out of leaflets.
Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you so much. We will try and find some time at the end. I'll just check again. Darren Safin isn't here. We'll move on to Eddie Gauci and Lena Sarah. Please come forward.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to present our concerns. Lena and I are neighbours and have been for many years. The first point I'd like to make is that I would like to request that the council more widely publicise these changes. As a ratepayer, I would like to be made fully aware of any proposed law changes, and the way I would like to see that being done is via notification with our rates. That way I can be confident that every ratepayer in this municipality actually gets notification of this. The only way I was notified of this was because Lena was good enough to actually show me a copy of this after collecting it from the library. I think if that hadn't occurred, I wouldn't have been made aware of these changes. There's three key items here which we would like to express our concern with. First one is camping for recreational purposes. The second one is for consumption of alcohol. And the third one is with regard to allowing others to take rubbish from our bins and to deposit rubbish into our own bins. And the first one which I'd like to refer to is camping concern. The concerns that we have around this is that, and I've got a long list of bullet points here, which is in my correspondence. I won't read each one of them out, but what I will do is that I would like to express our concerns around some of the impact of having people camping in our reserves and that type of thing in this particular area. The key things are these facilities are there for everybody to be used and shouldn't actually be made a camping ground for people who are homeless. I'm concerned about the residents that live around those areas and the social implications that may come from people congregating. Who's going to actually clean up the rubbish in these areas? Who's going to be responsible for providing services like toilets, showers and that type of thing? I mean, these are things that we as ratepayers, I don't believe, should be funding. There are some other key concerns around issues that this may cause. Are the Victoria Police fully on board with this? Are they adequately resourced to be able to cater for some of the challenges that may come from the congregation of people camping in our reserves? The second one that I'd like to, or that both Lena and I would like to object to, is the consumption of alcohol in public places. So with that one, the key one that I would like to raise a concern, a point on there would be the issue that this has the potential to increase the frequency of antisocial behaviour, something that we would all not like to see increase, particularly in our area here. There are some other points, but I won't cover those.
Thank you very much.
The last one is with regard to the rubbish.
You've just hit 3 minutes, so please start winding up. Thank you.
Yep, sure. So with the rubbish, we absolutely object to people being able to take rubbish from our bins. Key concern there is around identity theft coming from mail and that's been discarded. The second one is around people using our rubbish bins to dispose of their rubbish in. And the key concern about people putting illegal rubbish in our bins not being collected, and then we have to actually deal with the problem. So we absolutely object to that point.
Thank you very much.
And would like you to take that on board.
Thank you very much. And we've received your written submission. Thank you so much. Mr. Peter Thomas? No? Dawn Waite isn't here either. So we'll move on to John Engelhardt. Please come forward.
Thank you, councillors. I'd like to speak on behalf of Climate Action Moreland to our submission which we made. We are one of Moreland's many grassroots community groups that enliven the politics of our community through our activities. Some of these activities involve stalls and protests in public places. We operate within a very long tradition in Moreland of public street activity in engaging with our fellow citizens. Some of our activities are organised and planned well ahead of time. Occasionally, an activity might be spontaneously organised. We think both should be legal under the general local laws. We have a strong objection to any permit system for community groups involved in public engagement on the streets of our city. In particular, there appears to be no public review mechanism to provide transparency and accountability in reviewing any permit applications that are denied. We realise that once you have a permit system, it can be used at some time against particular groups to arbitrarily hinder political and community engagement, and as a force against local democracy. This might not happen under the present council and administration, but we should be vigilant against setting up systems that can be used to suppress local community democracy at some time in the future. We should heed the lessons of 1930s Germany and the rise of fascism and our friends that invaded this meeting room, which occurred to a large degree because of a lack of vigilance. Ordinary people let it happen. We have raised 9 detailed objections to the draft local laws in our submission. Most relate to our group's activity or potential activity. I'll now briefly speak to each of those. Camping in a public place, local law 2.7. Could this law be used against 24-hour protest vigils when they occur? I think it could. Street art in a public place, local law 6.2. Could this law be used to criminalise or penalise children or adults involved in writing chalk messages on pavements during a protest? I submit it could.
Just at 2.5 minutes, John.
Advertising signs, local law 6.3. This law does not distinguish between community and commercial advertising signs and could be used to hinder community engagement. Selling in public place, general local law 7.1 and 7.2. Most community groups raise money through selling things at some time or another. This law could be used to hinder community group fundraising activities. Furniture in a public place, general
John, you
local
just hit
law
3 minutes. If you could please start winding up.
7.5. This could be used to stop community stalls and also against disabled access to street protests. Occupy or fence off part of a road, local law 8.1. Sometimes roads need to be occupied by people, sometimes via a proper permit process and sometimes spontaneously. They are our streets. Sometimes parts of roads need to be temporarily fenced off for pedestrian safety. I cite a legitimate example in my submission.
John, we do have to start winding up. Thank you so much. Mr. Dave Holmes.
Socialist Alliance is happy that Council has removed several of the most objectionable clauses in the draft law, which negatively impinged on civil liberties. But we remain strongly opposed to the projected permit and fine regime for busking and street art and for street stalls run by campaign and political groups. I doubt that anyone could seriously claim that busking is a problem in Moreland. Busking is infrequent and irregular. It's not as if hordes of buskers are competing for limited space and attention. The proposed regulatory regime is a response to a non-issue and a bad response at that. It is simply not needed. If these clauses are not scrapped, yet another avenue of expression will be curtailed and poor people, including the homeless, will have fewer chances of getting some extra income. On a number of Saturday mornings, I've seen a very young girl busk with her violin next to Baker's Delight at the corner of the Coburg Mall and Sydney Road. Nearby, her mum keeps a watchful eye on her. Obviously, this is a big public order issue and desperately needs regulation to keep it in check. Seriously though, if the draft law is passed, will this charming scenario be in an approved zone or not? And if it's not, what will happen? It would be way better for Council to do nothing and leave such activities alone. There is no problem. Buskers will organise themselves. Through section 7.5, the draft law will subject street stalls, typically a card table and perhaps an A-frame as well, to a permit and fine regime. There will be no fee, but the fines are hefty. Without a doubt, this will have a chilling effect on political activity. Most campaigning groups that want to engage directly with people will want to set up a street stall at some point. We should be clear, granting permits will not be automatic. They can be denied. Council officials will decide who gets a permit, and there will be plenty of latitude for discrimination and arbitrariness. Where are the published criteria for granting or refusing a permit? What is the mechanism and time frame for appeals? We haven't been told. Once again, this is a bad response to a non-existent problem. Why is council pushing these clauses? The only argument I've heard is that we need to safeguard disability access. This is completely specious. I have been involved with operating a Socialist Alliance card table store for about 10 years in the Coburg Mall on Saturday mornings. That is, for about 40 mornings a year, for a decade, we've been doing our thing without incident. I defy anyone to seriously argue that people in motorised wheelchairs, or anyone else for that matter, have ever been impeded by us. But they may well have been inconvenienced by all the tables and stuff put out by the shops in the mall or along Sydney Road.
If I could please ask you to start winding up. We've just hit 3 minutes.
And on the few occasions where there have been several stalls or activities in the mall at the same time, we've simply organised ourselves without any dramas. We call for completely scrapping the proposed clauses which would regulate campaigning and political stalls. Instead, let's put our faith in people's basic good sense and goodwill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Mr. David Nuns. Please come forward.
Thank you very much, and I'll do my very best within 3 minutes, and I hope that's not seen as an unnecessary impingement on my freedom of speech. I'll do my best. Good evening. A couple of comments I'd like to make in relation to public consultation, given that the fact that we have 160,000 residents, the level of public consultation, I must say, is substandard and not what I expect from local government per se, and certainly not what I expect from the supposed Republic of Moreland. The two drop-in sessions were not, we were told, designed to take feedback, and they were more perhaps PR motivated than practically motivated. The whole purpose and the motivation behind these laws are highly questionable in my view. I hope that the elected council representatives have read my submission. I make some quite large and significant criticism of both the public consultation and the proposed local laws and their interaction with the Human Rights and Responsibilities Act. And I would urge council to give them I'm not sure what the word is. Give that the attention that it deserves. Thank you, Natalie. Because these rights that are given to everyone in this room, they're given to us by the Parliament of Victoria. They are given to us because they give effect to the 1947 Universal Declaration on Human Rights. They're given to us, and no council, no administration, no CEO, no elected councillors or mayor or deputy mayor, in my view, has the right to restrict that human right that I have, given to me by the Victorian Legislature. So I think you need to be very, very careful and very, very mindful if you proceed down the path of making certain restrictions that I've clearly identified in my submission about whether you expose yourself to being in breach of the Human Rights and Responsibility Act in the state of Victoria. What I'm saying to the elected councillors is that if you claim this is the Republic of Moreland, then deliver the Republic of Moreland. Don't restrict public political life. None of you are elected on that platform. I did not campaign on that platform, and no one here did. So I'd strongly suggest to you that in terms of public consultation, you really do need to go back to square one, because it is just not good enough. Just not good enough. And in my professional life, if I was dealing with an employer, matters like this would be in a Fair Work Commission within a snap, because you've failed the basics of consultation. You've failed the basics of consultation. I've posed many questions, and I look forward to answers to those questions on the 4th page of my submission. I've made some reference to the permit system and how it's fundamentally flawed in that the Human Rights Charter provides every citizen of the state of Victoria with a right of appeal, and in your own local laws you don't have the right of appeal. What I find interesting is how is it that a public document, very, very poorly presented, very, very poorly drafted, no marked up references, no easy way to identify what's been proposed and what's new, how that gets past the post of your own internal human rights check when you assess matters. You must do that, and you are legislated to do that. And I find it bizarre that this document finds itself into the public domain without those balances and checks being assessed, because if it had been assessed against the Human Rights and Responsibilities Act, many of these provisions would not have found themselves in the document.
So thank you very much. Thank you for your
4
submission.
minutes.
Thank you for your submission. Got Amina and Bernard Flynn next. Please come forward.
Good evening, councillors. Just Bernard Flynn here tonight. Michael Pettit, a member of the Moreland Community for Action on Transport, made the submission. He's overseas enjoying life somewhere. I'm speaking on behalf of that community. First of all, Michael, in his submission, was speaking about 3 or 4 particular things: the permits and fines, obviously, and the assembling in public places and the results of those. I would think that the consultation process, when I've looked at consultations over the years, I think there has been some listening, despite what may have been said by others. The council has been listening and responding, and quite clearly they've responded to the expression of community concern about the draconian proposals in regard to permits and fines, and also community groups communicating with the public. We believe that democracy is paramount in any community. That is, the people need to be heard. Ordinary people need to be heard in the local area, and they need to be free to be able to communicate with one another, find out information, and think about and discuss that information. Ordinary people. We've just had tonight an incident where extreme views were shouted at us by a group, and that's one way of doing it, and that may need to be controlled in some sort of way. But for ordinary people, you don't need that controls, and councillors need to realise that. So the second thing is, or the other thing is that I want to say, and not too much, is there are certain commercial activities in regard to fundraising or spruiking and that sort of thing, and somehow or another, the idea of spruiking or busking needs to be clearly separated from that, from talking to people and maybe raising some funds for a campaign. We had a very successful campaign with the Moreland Council and with other councils as well, and with other community groups. We had a very successful campaign in regard to preventing the construction of the East-West Freeway and the destruction of Royal Park through simply community meetings. People met, we had tables, we had street stalls, we had community consultation of our own making, sometimes random, sometimes planned, and all those things were successful. They were freely done, and people felt happy about those, and the council needs to support in its draft document, in its final document, the ability for ordinary community people to meet and assemble and to discuss the issues that are available, that are relevant. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your submission. All right, now we're moving on to the specific categories that people want to speak to. So the first item is the permit system. Are Chris Lee and Helen Panopoulos here? Yes, please come forward.
Hi there. Hi everybody. I'm from the Refugee Action Collective, and I'm here to represent the collective about street permits. They say it's a slippery slope, and we hear that a lot, but I want to give you actual concrete examples of slippery slope. I've been doing stalls for the past 3 years in various locations, in the northern suburbs, in the eastern suburbs, etc. In the city of the Council of Barandura, I rang for a permit to do it the proper way, and they said to me, there is nowhere in the city of Hawthorne or Camberwell, in those areas where you can leaflet. Nowhere, absolutely nowhere. And I said, surely, when I pressed, and she said, well, you can leaflet behind Coles in the car park, and only if Coles says okay. Fortunately, Coles said okay, so we leaflet in the car park. I think that breaches all these human rights and free speech. That's one example. The other example is the Maribyrnong Council. Ironic, you would say. getting a permit there is impossible. Impossible because we've jumped all the hoops, and every time we've jumped the hoop, they've pushed the bar higher, higher and higher. We leafleted in Nicholson Mall Square without a permit, and we actually moved the drug dealers away that day. And it's ironic because the asylum seeker resources down the road, there's a high migrants of and asylum seekers in Merri-bek, and yet the council will not give us a permit to leaflet. And my objective is to change the heart and minds of people that are against asylum seekers. And we do that by our leaflets, by discussions, one person at a time. Couldn't do that in Merri-bek. And you would think multicultural, suburb, progressive, whatever. So we spoke to a councillor and we said, Mr. Councillor, can you please see what the permit department is up to? He couldn't even convince them. I spoke to the permit master, and he said to me, my dream for Merri-bek, for Footscray, is to have white immigrants back. Quote, unquote. We are volunteers, we don't have the resources to fight it. So I moved on to a next council. Saying that, the council of Moonee Valley, brilliant, brilliant. Unfortunately, they were the exception. The City of Yarra, progressive. They said, welcome asylum seekers. We've had a permit there once before. I had to reapply again, even though there were no objections, no one complained against us. I had to jump all through the hoops. I had to speak to 4 different people to say, hey, how's my permit going? It took over 6-7 weeks for it to come through. These are concrete examples that I can give you. Eventually it came through, and I still was restricted to one location on Swan Street outside Coles, and I still had to get the permission of Coles, which fortunately we used to work together, the manager and I, so he said, yeah, no problems. So that was that one. Williamstown was okay. Williamstown is good.
You've got about a minute left. The clock started a bit late, so you've probably gone over 3 minutes. So if you can start winding up, yeah, it started a bit late. But if you've got another minute, if you want to,
concrete. There's about.
So you've got about a minute left.
A minute left. Thank you. In the 3 years, no one's run over our table. We haven't obstructed wheelchair or anything like that. I'll give.
Well, I think Helen's covered everything, and the previous speakers have covered everything. But just to reiterate, stalls are important for a voluntary organisation to get out information, to talk to people, collect petitions, to raise money through badge sales, T-shirt sales, etc., which is important for a democratic society to have voluntary organisations sort of communicating with people, raising money to fund their activities. So, yeah, we support what's been said by most of the other speakers, that the restrictions on stalls and on sale of material by voluntary organisations should be, there should not be a requirement for a permit. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Lee. Next got Alison Thorne. Is Alison Thorne here? No? Oh, yep, you have.
Yes, hello councillors. I'm speaking on behalf of the Freedom Socialist Party. We're a socialist feminist political party based in Brunswick. Our organising centre, Solidarity Salon, is in Sydney Road, and we have a long, proud history of organising here in Moreland. And we're opposed to a number of elements addressed in our submission, but given the limited time, I particularly want to talk tonight about the ban on street stalls and furniture in public places. This is extremely anti-democratic, and it is not a measure that we would expect the council in an area such as Moreland to embrace. Now, in 2010, the Freedom Socialist Party was part of a campaign called Public Space versus Marketplace. And on the 27th of October that year, I chaired a public meeting on behalf of the Freedom Socialist Party to explore these issues. And that public meeting was at the Brunswick Town Hall. the council provided the meeting space for free. And what we were campaigning about was the increased privatisation of public space. The profiteers at Berkeley Square Shopping Centre were privatising space and stopping community groups from organising. This trend is happening right across Melbourne, with more and more community space being privatised. What the council is now proposing is similar restrictions on the public streets of Moreland, and we object. However, while we welcome the decision of the council to drop the proposal to ban leafleting, council must take the next logical step and remove the ban on stalls without a permit. For decades, the Freedom Socialist Party has set up stalls on a periodic basis in Victoria Street Mall in Coburg. We've distributed campaign leaflets, collected signatures on petitions, and distributed our socialist feminist publications. We've campaigned on many issues which I don't have time to run through, but given events tonight, one of them has been the need to combat the far right. And I must say, I stand in solidarity with the Moreland Council and your decisions around Invasion Day. Hurrah for you. When we set up a small table, what we do is we decorate it with posters so shoppers can actually see what we're campaigning about, and this works particularly well because it's a very visible way of making it clear to people what we're campaigning about. Those who are interested can approach us, and those who don't continue about their business. Now, if we can only hand out a leaflet but not have a stall, we have to actually go and approach people about that. They can't see what the issue is and approach us. By way of wrapping up, community campaign groups can't afford the time or money to seek permits in order to be part of exercising our democratic rights. And to end, Moreland is an area with a long tradition of free speech, and we call on council to respect that long tradition. We're sure that council is well aware of the pioneering role of artist and communist activist Noel Counihan and his role in the 1933 free speech fights by unemployed workers. We think it's the ultimate hypocrisy to name the council's art gallery after this icon and then attempt to muzzle us, the 21st century Noel Counihans. Toss out these shameful anti-democratic measures now.
Yeah. Thank you, Alison. Next, we've got Debbie Brennan. Is Debbie Brennan here?
Hello, I'm the Melbourne organiser for Radical Women. Radical Women is an international socialist feminist organisation that's been in Moreland for 35 years. And we have been very active in the community, campaigning around everything from keeping the upfield line open to removing neo-Nazis from Brunswick, Faulkner and Coburg to stopping violence against women. We applaud the council's decision to drop so-called Australia Day. And I'm going to be using this as an example for our arguments of why bylaws must not hinder in any way communities' capacity to organize or expose any section of our community to official harassment. And let's just think about what brought the struggle for Aboriginal justice to this great moment of dropping Australia Day. It was the decades of organizing in the streets on a national scale under Aboriginal leadership. It was those street stalls, it was the leafleting, the talking to people, the protesting, which culminated in the successive and massive rallies and marches that challenged Australia's genocidal history. And the power of 60,000 protesters this past Invasion Day that brought Melbourne to a standstill would have been felt on the night that our councillors voted to take this important step just 2 weeks ago. So How would council be able to reconcile this with the anti-democratic bylaws it's considering? The answer is that you cannot. Permits and fines are a way of censoring community organizing. The bylaws concerning street organizing and drinking, busking, or camping in public places are not about public access or supporting the homeless. They're about controlling activism and people who are homeless and poor. This is a global trend of clamping down on civil liberties, and Moreland Council is in danger of joining that trend. Let's just go back to the Australia Day decision. Council should be consulting First Nations people about bylaws that penalize activity in public places, such as busking, camping, or drinking. A council that acknowledges that this is Aboriginal land and no longer celebrates 230 years of dispossession and genocide would do this very thing. These same bylaws affect the broader community. They're a common tactic used by authorities around the world to proscribe those who are poor and homeless. Now, it's very highly likely, as we saw tonight, that we're going to have to defend Moreland Council, and we do not need bylaws that are going to be hindering us in any way of doing this. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your submission. Next got Julie de Blackwell. Please come forward.
Hi, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I want to reiterate what many of my fellow Moreland residents have already said, in particular Section 6 and Section 7.1 and 7.5. I feel that I'll try and talk to a few points that are perhaps a little bit different to some of the other ones that have been said, but and I understand that the council has redrafted sections of the original draft that was released, but signs on property that share a border with public space, no street art, no portable signs in a public space, no goods or signs on shops, on outside walls, no spruiking, no furniture in a public place. These are all provisions that if they go ahead and implemented will infringe on our rights as citizens to express our views in public. And I can only just say that I agree with whatever's been said before about applying for permits. I think they're a form of censoring us, and we have no certainty that they will be granted. And I think it's just simply undemocratic and it must not proceed. I think also that the caveats that are inserted that are supposed to protect homeless people doesn't mean that they won't still be targeted. The prevention of people camping in a vehicle and the need for homeless people to establish their situation to the satisfaction of a council officer will place unwarranted stress on these very vulnerable people. I'd also like to draw council's attention to a decision yesterday by the Melbourne City Council that they had legal advice that banning camping is contestable and that they would likely lose, and they have since revised their position about homeless people and camping. So I think that you can achieve what you need to achieve without these draconian measures. I've been a Moreland member and ratepayer for over 20 years, and I was really quite shocked that what is supposedly a progressive council could have put this bylaw before us. I think it's really bad. I think it's shame on you, and I think you have to revise it.
Thank you for your submission.
Thank you.
Is Vita Mezatesta here? I haven't seen her yet. Vita Mezatesta is not here, I don't think. Nope. Pauline Galvin? Stephen Roach? Carolyn Beattie? Okay, that's it for the permit system, and we're now moving on to items regarding busking. And Mr. David Glantz, are you here tonight? Please come forward.
Yeah, good evening, and I've been a ratepayer here for 25 years, and congratulations on your decision about the January the 26th matter. There are a lot of people who support what you did, and I'm one of them. On busking, I really can't believe we're talking about this. I have racked my brains for a time when I've seen a busker in Moreland. I really, really and honestly cannot remember one. My view is, far from having a system, a permit system for busking, you should be putting out a public call for more people to come onto the streets and busk. Here are two things as a socialist I don't normally say. I think having busking permits is a nanny state, and I think market forces should prevail, and you should actually bend the market by actually putting up subsidies for people to busk, particularly, I suspect, in places like Hadfield and Fawkner, which are even quieter than the southern parts of the municipality. On the more substantive point about furniture and a permit for furniture, I think there's a deep philosophical problem here. I think businesses who want to use public space to make profit should be subject to permits. They use that space probably 5 or 6, maybe 7 days a week. They occupy large parts of public space, and they should be accountable for that, because what they're doing is not for the public benefit, but for a private benefit. I think a community group of whatever sort, whether it's political or non-political, when it comes out onto the streets, is not there to make a profit. It's there to use a public space in a public way. And I think it's fundamentally crucial, as a number of speakers have said previously, that we reaffirm the principle that open space, public space, is for the use of the public. There is a misunderstanding that democracy is about voting, and that's one very small part of it. Democracy is also about debate, it's discussion, it's about disagreement, it's about campaigning, it's trying to persuade other people of your point of view, whether that's on a toxic building site or a refugee question or whatever the case may be. And democracy isn't something that can be neatly compartmentalised. We have the right to vote because of the Eureka Stockade and the actions of the suffragette movement. So democracy as voting cannot be compartmentalised as the be-all and end-all. If we don't have life on the streets, then actually we don't have democracy. And I am so grateful I live in a municipality with significant strip shopping, because that means actually thousands of people come onto the streets and meet their neighbours and talk to each other and interact. And I think we should be encouraging that rather than the opposite.
Thank you very much for your submission. We're now moving on to submissions regarding the consumption of liquor in public places. Mr. Peter Jeffs, are you here? Yes. Yes, please come forward.
Thank you. My submission is in regard to camping in public places, and by now we should all know what the clause 2.7 states. I suspect that by making this provision for camping by homeless persons or persons experiencing challenging circumstances, someone in council has decided to look after the welfare of these people. This is admirable, but it should not be to the detriment or amenity of the public areas. I also think that is something that is better served by the state government and the various welfare agencies. I would have thought that council would have learned a lesson from the backpackers taking over the Coburg Lake car park. I personally don't have a problem with the odd homeless person sleeping rough in exceptional circumstances, provided their presence doesn't cause any problems or interfere with the amenity of the area. If paragraph 2.7 was worded appropriately, local laws officers would still have the power to move them on if need be. My understanding of this draft law is that it is divided into two sets of circumstances. The first states camping is permissible in prescribed areas. I have been advised by a council officer that the prescribed areas have not yet been set by council. The setting of prescribed areas is a formal process that can be undertaken at any stage. At this point, it has not been determined if this will occur during or after the making of the local law. In the absence of any further advice or regulatory impact statement, I can only assume that the intent of this section is for special events which may require people to camp on site overnight. My fear is that Council could use this to allow for camping by the class of persons mentioned in Clause A and B if these clauses are not included in the local law. The second states that camping is not permissible in public areas unless a person is homeless or is in need of secure accommodation, or a person experiencing challenging circumstances and is in need of additional support. If this section is included, it would allow camping without restriction, and there is nothing Council could do to restrict it. From the draft, the class of person mentioned in Clause A and B could also camp in prescribed areas without question. We could end up with en masse camping in any public area. Other things that need to be considered: if this local law is passed, once this class of person takes up camp in a public area, what are the unintended consequences of their occupation?
Mr Jeff, you're just hitting 3 minutes. If you could please wind up. Thank you.
All right. Who is responsible for the cleanliness and security of the area? Who will supply the toilet, shower, cooking facilities? Do we have to put up with people urinating, defecating and fornicating in public areas? What about the health and safety of other users? I would submit that the local law simply be camping in a vehicle, etc., is only permitted in prescribed areas.
Thank you, Mr Jeff. Thank you for your submission. Is Mr John Robinson here? Mr John Robinson? No? Okay, we'll move on to the next topic, which is camping. Is Mr. Joey Meyer here? Joey Meyer. Adrian Martinelli? Sorry, the mic's not... I think we have some amplification of the mic if possible. I'm not sure it's gone for some reason. Adrian Martinelli is here. Oh, please come forward. Just missed it. Just to focus. Come, please make your submission.
Good evening, everybody. I'd just like to concur with everything that gentleman said, but I would like to add a couple of things, or expand on the responsibility of council towards those homeless once they do take camp. In addition, cost to ratepayers, cleaning up the mess, hazardous waste, etc. I did notice that one of the tenders active at the moment was sanitary and hazardous waste services. So I'm not sure if that's in connection with that area as well. Safety concerns.